Welcome back to Buddhism Demystified, where we like to take these deep dives, into all things Buddhism. And today we're going to be cracking open the Heart Sutra.
Ooh.
It's a really important text, in Mahayana Buddhism. And we're going to be looking at one of its most famous lines. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form.
Right.
Which can sound
a
little paradoxical.
little bit.
Yeah, even a bit intimidating.
Yeah, for sure.
But it actually holds some really profound insights about the nature of reality. This idea of emptiness, it really resonated with me recently. I was feeling super overwhelmed. It's just like all the stuff going on in my life, work deadlines, family commitments, you name it. And a friend of mine had been talking about like the benefits of meditation, so I thought I'd give it a shot. But it turns out sitting still with my own thoughts, even for like 5 minutes, was way harder than I expected. My mind was just racing with anxieties and to-dos. But, that experience, it actually helped me kind of see how much we cling to our thoughts. Even the stressful ones, it's like a little glimpse into how, clinging to those thoughts can actually cause more suffering. And speaking of finding a little peace in the chaos, if you're finding some clarity here with us on Buddhism Demystified, we would love it if you'd hit that like button, subscribe, and leave a review. It really does help other people discover the show and join our exploration. All right, so let's unpack this Heart Sutra mystery. When we talk about emptiness in Buddhism, what are we actually talking about?
That's such a great question. And, it can definitely sound a bit bleak at first, like emptiness, what? But emptiness, or śūnyatā in Sanskrit, it isn't about things not existing at all. It's more about this understanding that nothing exists in a fixed, independent way. So think about like a simple object, like a chair. We see it, we sit on it, we call it a chair. But if you really look closer, it's made up of like countless smaller parts. Atoms, molecules, all constantly changing and interacting. And it relies on, trees for wood craftspeople to actually build it. Even the earth, to provide the materials. It's all interconnected.
So it's not about like things sort of disappearing into nothingness. It's more about seeing past our labels and recognizing that interconnected and ever-changing nature of things.
Precisely. And that's where this very mind-bending phrase, form is emptiness, emptiness is form, really comes into play. It's about understanding the relationship between those two seemingly opposite concepts.
Yeah, that's the part that always trips me up. How can something be both form and emptiness?
Yeah.
At the same time.
Agreed.
It's like trying to imagine a square circle.
It seems paradoxical, but let's try this analogy. Think about the ocean and the waves. Each wave has this distinct form. It rises, crests, and crashes. We can point to it. We can say that's a wave. But where does the wave end and the ocean begin? Can you really separate them? They're fundamentally interconnected.
Right. The wave is just this like temporary expression of the ocean. It arises from the ocean and then dissolves back into it.
Exactly. And in the same way, all the forms we perceive in the world around us, people objects, even our thoughts and emotions. They're like waves arising from this vast ocean of emptiness. They're constantly changing, interconnected, and ultimately empty of a separate, permanent self.
Okay, so the Heart Sutra is basically encouraging us to see the world as this constant flow of forms, interconnected and emerging from this ground of emptiness.
Yes, and this realization can be so incredibly liberating. It helps us let go of the need to cling to things as fixed and unchanging, and that clinging, that attachment is often the source of a lot of our suffering.
Yeah, that makes sense. If we're always trying to grasp onto things that are inherently impermanent, we're just setting ourselves up for disappointment, even heartache. We're fighting against the natural flow of reality.
Exactly. And this idea of impermanence, this fleeting nature of all things, is beautifully illustrated in a story about a potter and a clay pot. It highlights how the essence of something remains even as its form changes.
Oh, I love a good story. I'm all ears.
So this skilled potter crafted this beautiful, functional clay pot. It held water, perhaps flowers. People admired its shape, its craftsmanship, but eventually a curious child, always asking the big questions, wondered, what is this pot really made of?
Children have a way of cutting right to the heart of the matter, don't they?
They do. So the potter, with a knowing smile, simply replied, it is made of clay. And to really emphasize this point, she took the pot and broke it. Pointing to the scattered pieces, she explained, the pot was always clay. Its form as a pot was temporary. But its essence, its fundamental nature remained the same. It was always clay.
It's a powerful image. The pot, like all forms, is temporary. It can change, it can break. But the essence, the clay, remains unchanged.
Exactly. And in this analogy, the clay represents emptiness. It's that unchanging ground from which all forms arise and to which they eventually return. just like the ocean and the waves.
Okay, I see the connection. So how does this emptiness idea actually play out in our everyday lives? It's a fascinating concept, but does it really change how we live, how we interact with the world?
It absolutely can. Think about how often we get caught up in the surface appearance of things. We make judgments. We compare ourselves to others. We get fixated on achieving specific outcomes. But what if we could see those judgments, comparisons, and attachments as just temporary forms, just like the clay pot? What if we could see them as arising from that deeper ground of emptiness?
That's an interesting perspective. It's like taking a step back and recognizing that our opinions, our desires, even our struggles are all part of this ever-changing flow. It's not about denying them, but seeing them in a different light. Precisely. And this understanding can be particularly helpful in navigating conflict. Think about a time when you had a disagreement with someone. What were you holding on to so tightly? What if those beliefs weren't seen as absolute truths, but as temporary forms arising from your own unique experiences and conditioning?
That's really thought-provoking. Instead of getting caught in that trap of, I'm right, you're wrong, you could try to see both perspectives as different expressions.
Yeah.
Arising from this underlying emptiness, it could create more space for understanding and compassion.
Yes. And from that place of spaciousness, from that recognition of interconnectedness, it becomes so much easier to genuinely listen to the other person, to really see their perspective, and to find a resolution that works for everyone. It shifts the whole dynamic.
That's powerful. It's like the Heart Sutra is offering us this whole new way of looking at the world, at ourselves and at our relationships with others. But I have to admit, it's still a lot to wrap my head around. It feels vast, almost like trying to grasp the entire ocean in my hands.
It definitely takes time and practice to fully embody this wisdom. It's not a quick fix or simple answer. But luckily, Buddhism offers many tools and practices that can guide us on this journey. And one of the most helpful ways to contemplate these ideas is through analogies and stories.
More stories. I'm always up for a good story. What do you have for us?
Have you ever heard of Indra's net?
Indra's net. I think I've heard the name before, but refresh my memory.
Imagine this vast, infinite net stretching out in all directions. And at each intersection of this net, there's a shimmering jewel. And each jewel reflects all the other jewels in the net, creating this breathtaking vision of interconnectedness. Every jewel reflecting and being reflected by every other jewel simultaneously.
Wow, I can picture that. This dazzling, interconnected web of light and reflections.
Exactly. And just like Indra's net, each of us, every being, every phenomenon in the universe is interconnected in this way. We're all reflecting and influencing each other, all part of this vast, shimmering web of existence.
It's like we're not just isolated individuals bumping around in the universe. We're intrinsically linked, each of us reflecting a small piece of the whole.
Yes, and when we cling to this illusion of separateness, when we forget this interconnectedness, that's when we experience suffering. We create this artificial barrier between ourselves and the rest of the world.
So the Heart Sutra is inviting us to see ourselves as part of this Indra's net, to recognize that our actions, thoughts, and even our suffering are all interconnected with everything else. It's like a call to recognize our shared humanity, our shared existence.
Precisely. And to embrace this interconnectedness with compassion and understanding. After all, if we're all reflections of each other, harming another is ultimately harming ourselves. It's recognizing that our actions have consequences that ripple outwards.
It's a powerful realization. It really puts things into perspective. I love how this analogy highlights the beauty and interconnectedness of it all, even amidst the challenges and suffering we might experience. It's like finding hope and connection within the messiness of life.
Absolutely. And to bring this back to our everyday lives, recognizing this interconnectedness can completely transform how we approach conflict relationships, even our own sense of self.
I'm seeing how this form is emptiness concept can be a real game changer. It's like a key that unlocks a whole new way of understanding the world and our place in it. And speaking of unlocking new perspectives, I think it's time for another story, don't you?
I always enjoy a good story, especially one that can further illuminate these profound teachings.
Well, I was thinking about this idea of impermanence and how our thoughts and feelings are constantly changing, just like everything else. And I remember this beautiful story about a monk contemplating reflections on a river.
Ah, yes. A perfect way to illustrate the fleeting nature of our internal world.
All right, so imagine this. A serene river flowing through a peaceful valley, reflecting the mountains, the sky, the trees. It's like a visual representation of peace itself. And sitting by this river is a wise old monk, deep in contemplation.
I can only imagine what profound insights might arise from such a serene setting.
Well, as he observes the reflections, shimmering on the water's surface, the monk realizes something really profound. He thinks to himself, These reflections, they're just like our thoughts and feelings. They appear, they change, they vanish. None of them have this fixed or permanent nature. They're simply transient reflections on the surface of our awareness.
What a beautiful insight. He's realizing that our internal world, just like the external world, is in this constant state of flux. Nothing remains static.
Exactly. And the monk continues his contemplation, realizing that just as the river doesn't cling to the reflections, we too can learn to let go of our attachment to thoughts and feelings. We can allow them to arise, pass through our awareness, and fade away, without getting caught up in their temporary nature.
That's a powerful lesson in mindfulness and non-attachment. Instead of resisting or clinging to our internal experience, we can learn to simply observe it with a sense of spaciousness and acceptance.
Yes, and the story ends with the monk finding this profound sense of inner freedom as he watches the reflections fade with the setting sun. He realizes that true peace comes not from grasping onto fleeting experiences, but from embracing the ever-changing nature of reality itself.
That's a beautiful and profound way to end the story. It reminds us that true freedom lies in letting go of our attachment to fixed ideas and embracing the fluidity and impermanence of life itself.
I couldn't have said it better myself. This story really highlights how understanding form as emptiness can lead to a more peaceful and accepting way of being in the world. It's not about denying our experiences, but rather about seeing them with a wiser, more compassionate perspective.
And this shift in perspective can have a ripple effect on all aspects of our lives. It can change how we approach challenges, celebrate joys, and relate to the world around us.
Absolutely. And that's a great place to pause for now. We've covered a lot of ground, from the concept of emptiness to the ocean and wave analogy, the clay pot parable, Indra's net, and even the story of the monk and the river reflections. We'll be back soon to continue our exploration of the Heart Sutra and its implications for a more fulfilling and meaningful life. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the Heart Sutra.
It really is amazing. We've been discussing these concepts of emptiness, impermanence, and interconnectedness. And I was just thinking, these ideas, they were pretty radical when they were first introduced. Can you imagine, what it must have been like to hear them for the first time?
It must have been a true paradigm shift. In a world where so many philosophies focused on finding permanence and a solid sense of self, the Buddha comes along and says, hey, it's all fluid, interconnected, and constantly changing. It challenges our deeply ingrained ways of thinking, even today.
Yeah, it's like we're wired to cling to things.
Yeah.
To seek that sense of security and control. But the Heart Sutra, it's like it gently nudges us to loosen our grip, to embrace the flow of life.
Yes. And it's not about becoming passive or indifferent to the world around us. It's about engaging with the world from this place of wisdom and compassion, recognizing that our actions have consequences that extend far beyond ourselves, impacting the entire web of existence.
So by understanding emptiness, we actually become more responsible, not less.
Yeah.
It's like realizing that our choices have a real impact on the world around us.
Exactly. It's about recognizing our interconnectedness and acting accordingly. The Heart Sutra reminds us that we're all in this together, for better or worse. And that realization can be a powerful motivator for positive change. It encourages us to consider the well-being of others, not just our own.
I love that. It's not just about personal liberation. It's about contributing to a more compassionate and just world for everyone.
That's at the heart of it. The Heart Sutra isn't just some philosophical treatise to be studied. It's a guide for living a more meaningful and fulfilling life. It shows us how to cultivate wisdom and compassion, both individually and collectively.
So how do we actually apply these profound teachings to our daily lives? It's one thing to intellectually understand the concepts, but how do we make them real? How do we bridge the gap between theory and practice?
That's the key question, isn't it? And there's no one-size-fits-all answer. The path of Buddhist practice is deeply personal, but I think one of the most essential starting points is to cultivate mindfulness.
Mindfulness. Isn't it just about paying attention to your breath or meditating?
That's certainly part of it, but it's much broader than that. Mindfulness is about bringing this gentle, non-judgmental awareness to all aspects of our experience, our thoughts, emotions, physical sensations, and even the world around us. It's about truly being present in each moment.
So it's like hitting the pause button on autopilot.
Mm-hmm.
And actually noticing what's happening right now without getting swept away by it all.
Exactly. And as we develop this quality of mindfulness, we start to see things more clearly. We become aware of how often we get caught up in our thoughts, our stories, our anxieties. We see how easily we cling to things that are constantly changing, how we create suffering by resisting the natural flow of life.
And it's in that awareness, in that space between our thoughts and our reactions,
Yeah.
that the real transformation begins.
Precisely. It's in those moments of clear seeing that we can loosen the grip of our attachments and embrace the truth of impermanence. We can start to make different choices that align with our deepest values, and create more peace both within ourselves and in the world around us.
So mindfulness is like the gateway to understanding and living the wisdom of the Heart Sutra. It helps us connect the dots between these profound concepts and our everyday lives.
I think that's a wonderful way to put it. Mindfulness is the foundation for cultivating compassion, wisdom, and ultimately freedom from the suffering we create by clinging to illusions of permanence and separateness.
Okay, that makes sense. But mindfulness can be challenging, can it? Our minds are so busy constantly chattering away. How do we actually quiet the noise and find that stillness? How do we create that space for awareness?
It takes practice and patience. And it's not about completely silencing the mind. That's nearly impossible. It's more about learning to observe those thoughts and feelings without getting swept away by them. It's like watching clouds drift across the sky. We see them, we acknowledge them, but we don't need to grab onto them or let them dictate our mood.
So it's more about becoming the observer of our thoughts, rather than getting lost in the story they're telling.
That's a great analogy. And there are many practices that can help us develop this quality of mindful awareness. Meditation is certainly a powerful tool, but there are other ways to cultivate mindfulness throughout the day, even in the midst of our busy lives.
Like what? What are some practical tips for bringing more mindfulness into our daily routine?
Even something as simple as paying attention to your breath throughout the day can be a powerful anchor to the present moment. You can also practice mindful walking, paying attention to the sensations of your feet on the ground, the movement of your body. Even everyday tasks like eating or washing the dishes can become mindfulness practices.
Wait, mindful dishwashing. How does that work? It sounds a bit funny, but I'm intrigued.
It's about shifting your focus from the task itself to the sensory experience. Instead of letting your mind wander to your to-do list or replaying conversations in your head, you bring your full attention to the sensations of the warm water, the feel of the soapy dishes, the scent of the dish soap. It's about being fully present in that moment, experiencing it with all your senses.
I see. So it's not about the activity itself, but the quality of attention we bring to it. We can transform even mundane chores into opportunities for mindfulness practice.
Exactly. And as we practice bringing mindfulness to our everyday lives, we cultivate this deeper sense of presence and appreciation for the little things. We start to notice the beauty and wonder that often goes unnoticed when we're on autopilot.
That's a beautiful way to think about it. It's like finding the sacred in the ordinary, the extraordinary in the everyday.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of finding the sacred, I have another inspiring story that might illustrate this idea of emptiness and transformation.
I always appreciate a good story, especially one that brings these teachings to life.
This story is about a young monk who was struggling to understand the concept of emptiness. He went to his teacher and confessed, "Master, I've been meditating on emptiness for days, but I still don't understand. It just seems like nothingness. How can emptiness be the true nature of reality?"
It's a common misconception. When we first encounter these teachings, it's easy to misinterpret emptiness as a void, an absence of anything meaningful.
Right. So the wise teacher, in his infinite wisdom, decided to give the young monk a hands-on lesson. He took the monk to a nearby garden and pointed to this vibrant rose bush. "Look at this rose bush." The teacher said, "What do you see?"
I wonder what the monk saw in that rose bush. What did he notice?
Well, the monk, being a bit literal, replied, "I see a rose bush, master. It has thorns, leaves, and beautiful red roses in bloom."
A straightforward observation, but I have a feeling the teacher had something deeper in mind. He was encouraging the monk to look beyond the superficial.
You're absolutely right. The teacher then asked, "Yes, you see all those things, but what is the rose bush made of?"
He's challenging the monk to consider the interconnectedness and impermanence of form.
Exactly. The monk thought carefully and replied, "Well, it's made of earth, water, sunlight, and air. It needs all of these things to grow and thrive."
He's starting to see the rose bush not as a separate, independent entity, but as a manifestation of these interconnected elements.
Right. And the teacher, seeing the monk's understanding beginning to blossom, continued precisely. And where were all those elements before they became the rose bush?
That's a great question. He's guiding the monk to see the cyclical nature of existence, how forms constantly arise and dissolve.
Exactly. The monk paused, reflecting on this question, and then realized they were always present, master, just in different forms.
He's having a breakthrough. He's starting to grasp the concept of emptiness, not as nothingness, but as the ground of all being, the potential from which all forms emerge.
You got it. And the teacher, with a twinkle in his eye, asked one final question. And where will all those elements go when the rose bush withers and dies?
He's driving home the point of impermanence, the cyclical nature of existence.
Yes. And the monk, now fully understanding, replied, "They will return to the earth, the water, the air, and the sunlight. They will continue to exist, but in new forms."
What a beautiful realization. He's seeing the rose bush and all of reality as this constant dance of form and emptiness. Forms arise and pass away, but the underlying essence, the potential for new forms, always remains.
The teacher, pleased with his student's progress, summed up the lesson by saying, "That, my dear monk, is the true nature of emptiness. It is not nothingness, but the boundless ground of all, being the potential from which all forms arise and to which they eventually return. It is the source of creativity and transformation."
What a wonderful story. It beautifully illustrates how even the simplest things in nature, like a rose bush, can reveal the profound truths of emptiness and interconnectedness. We just need to learn to look with mindful eyes.
It's like the whole universe is whispering the teachings of the Heart Sutra, if we just open our hearts and minds to listen.
Beautifully said. Buddhist practice isn't about escaping the world or denying our experiences. It's about waking up to the true nature of reality right here, right now. It's about seeing the world with fresh eyes, with a heart full of compassion and a mind open to the mystery and beauty of it all.
I love that. So as we go about our day, whether we're meditating, washing dishes, or admiring a rose bush, we can remember these teachings and see the world through the lens of emptiness, impermanence, and interconnectedness. We can let go of the need to cling and control, and instead embrace the flow of life with more peace and presence.
Exactly. And as we do so, we cultivate this deeper sense of peace, compassion, and wisdom, both within ourselves and in the world around us. We become agents of positive change, contributing to a more harmonious and just world for all beings.
And that seems like a great point to take another pause in our exploration. We've delved into the Heart Sutra's teachings on emptiness, impermanence, and interconnectedness, and explored how we can bring these profound concepts into our everyday lives. Join us soon as we continue to unpack the wisdom of the Heart Sutra and its potential to transform our understanding of ourselves and the world around us. Welcome back to Buddhism Demystified. We've been on quite a journey, exploring the Heart Sutra, from the concept of emptiness to the interconnectedness of Indra's net. It's amazing how these ancient teachings can still provide so much guidance for navigating our modern lives.
It is truly fascinating how relevant the Heart Sutra remains even after centuries. It's a testament to the timeless wisdom contained within these teachings.
Absolutely. We've talked about how seeing the world through this lens of form is emptiness can really help us, deal with conflict, find peace amidst change, and even bring more awareness to our daily actions.
And it goes beyond just like individual well-being. Remember that analogy of Indra's net? Recognizing our interconnectedness inspires us to act with more compassion and understanding, knowing that our choices ripple outward and affect the entire web of existence.
Yeah, and we've also been exploring this idea of impermanence. It's a concept that can feel, challenging, even a bit daunting at times. But there's this powerful teaching within Buddhism, no mud, no lotus. Like, we often learn and grow the most from challenging experiences. And the Heart Sutra, it kind of seems to suggest that even suffering can be a teacher if we approach it with the right mindset.
That's a profound insight. In Buddhist thought, suffering is seen as like an inevitable part of the human experience. But the Heart Sutra offers us a way to transform our relationship with that suffering. By understanding the impermanence of all things, we can find freedom from clinging to fixed ideas and expectations, which are often the root of our pain. It's about recognizing that even difficult emotions are temporary. They arise, they pass just like everything else.
So it's not about denying or avoiding those difficult emotions, but more about seeing them with a different perspective, acknowledging them without judgment, understanding that they too are part of this ever-changing flow.
Exactly. It's about allowing ourselves to feel those emotions fully without resistance, and recognizing that they will eventually transform, just like the waves in the ocean. They crest and then recede.
That's a powerful shift in perspective. It's not about suppressing our experiences, but about learning to ride the waves of life with more grace and resilience.
Precisely. And that's where true freedom lies.
Yeah.
In letting go of the struggle against that natural flow of life and embracing the ebb and flow with an open heart and a clear mind.
That's such a beautiful image. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the Heart Sutra, what practical advice can we offer our listeners? How can we help them integrate these teachings into their everyday lives?
Well, we've talked about mindfulness as this really powerful tool for cultivating this way of being. By paying attention to our thoughts, our feelings, and sensations in the present moment, we can start to see the impermanent and interconnected nature of reality.
It's about bringing that mindful awareness off the meditation cushion and into the real world.
Absolutely. And there are so many opportunities to do that. We can practice mindful walking, mindful eating, even taking a few moments to simply pause and notice our breath. Remember, even washing the dishes can be a mindfulness practice.
Right. It's about bringing that quality of attention to whatever we're doing.
Right.
Rather than letting our minds, run on autopilot.
Exactly. And as we cultivate this mindful awareness, we start to notice those subtle ways in which we cling to things, the judgments we make, the expectations we hold. And in that noticing, we have the opportunity to choose differently, to respond to those thoughts and feelings with more compassion and understanding.
Yeah, it's like waking up from a dream and realizing we have more choices than we thought. We don't have to be controlled by our habits and reactions. We can choose to respond with more wisdom and kindness.
And as we make those skillful choices, we create this ripple effect of positivity, not just in our own lives, but in the lives of those around us. It's about recognizing that our actions, however small, have an impact on the world.
That's the beauty of the Heart Sutra. It's not just about personal enlightenment. It's about recognizing our interconnectedness and contributing to a more compassionate and just world for everyone. It's a call to action, an invitation to embody these teachings in all aspects of our lives.
That's a wonderful reminder.
So as we conclude our deep dive into the Heart Sutra, is there a key takeaway you'd like to leave our listeners with? What's the essence of what we've explored today?
If I had to choose just one, it would be this. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Everything is interconnected, impermanent, and ultimately empty of a fixed, independent self. By embracing this truth, by really letting it sink in, we can move through the world with more freedom, compassion, and peace. We can let go of the suffering we create by clinging to illusions of permanence and separateness, and instead open ourselves to the boundless possibilities of each moment.
That's beautifully put. It's a powerful reminder to carry with us as we navigate the complexities of life. And to our listeners, as you go about your day, notice the ways in which you can bring this wisdom into your interactions, your choices, and your understanding of yourself. The path of awakening is right here in every moment. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Remember to keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep exploring the beautiful and mysterious world of Buddhism. Until next time.